Hello and welcome to Bits That Begin with B. My name is Jim McCoy, and I'm here with the silent B in the background, Deb Bowling.
Hello.
Let's get right to today's tidbits. Today's bird is the barn swallow. The swallows are back. These birds catch insects on the wing, so they head south for the winter, but the pressure is on to get back because they want to find mates and they want to find the best nesting locations. So some of them kind of cheat and come back before it's really warm, for better or worse. Sometimes that pays. Other times, oops, not enough food. Starve to death, die. But we won't dwell on that. But they're just making it back as we're speaking. Now, barn swallows are gorgeous. They're dark blue on the back with a dark orange throat. The males are sort of a pale orange on the belly, and the females are kind of an off-white. But either way, they're gorgeous. They have these deeply forked tails that make them very elegant and graceful in flight. And they are amazing flyers. I have a memory of my childhood when, back before we understood the evils of cats running loose. By the way, they are brutal on the local fauna. They'll kill all kinds of critters just because it's their instinct. And you can have lots of cats in a neighborhood, which you'd never have in nature because they'd be territorial. And so it's just a bad thing. They'll kill a lot of birds and a lot of other critters. Okay, that's my preaching for the session. But we had a cat that we had running free in our backyard, and we had this barn. We weren't farmers, but an old farm got divided up, and we happened to have the barn. And in our barn, we had barn swallows, which was really cool. And our cat would be out there, and of course we hear about how quick cats are and how graceful and how amazing they are. Well, let me tell you, barn swallows are not impressed. The barn swallows would just dive bomb her and tie her in knots, and she would always try to catch them, and she'd never come close. And it was very amusing to watch. The second time that I was impressed by how graceful and fast barn swallows were was when one of our team at work, which was a large team, was out playing ultimate frisbee with way too many people on the field, just goofing around and running around. And of course, most critters, if they see humans running, will just beat it. But the barn swallows were, again, not impressed. And they said, oh, they're kicking up insects for us. Cool. And as we were playing ultimate frisbee, they were running around flying around right in between us as we ran, and it was like we were moving in slow motion to them. So yeah, it was just impressive to watch and there were lots of these. There were maybe 30 or 40 people and 30 or 40 barn swallows.
Almost like bats.
Yeah, and very quick, and very cool. So anyway, look for them. They like to nest on or near farms or other semi-open country. So sometimes it's a barn. Other times it's just any man-made structure. They will sometimes nest elsewhere, but they do like man-made structures. Sometimes you'll see them gliding low over a pond and snagging insects there. But yeah, look for that forked tail and just the elegant flight. All right, today's random B is bracketology. We just wrapped up the NCAA basketball tournament, men's and women's, and people love this. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about betting today, and one of the more benign forms for most people, because they don't put much money on it, is the annual NCAA brackets, where you put your money into a pool and you fill out a bracket and try and guess which college basketball teams are going to win.
You say bracketology is the science or art?
It is the science and art of bracketology, which is kind of amusing. I mean, people use this term bracketology, but nobody has a clue. It's so random. And one of the cool things about this, the NCAA tournaments, men's and women's, is that it's democratizing. Anyone can win, literally. A lot of times,
whether you know the sport or not.
Exactly, whether you know the sport or not.
Win for me.
Yeah. You'd be amazed how often the person who knows the least about college basketball wins the pool. And they help you along because every team has a seed from 1 to 16 in their region, and the top seeds play the bottom seeds, and so you can kind of predict who's likely to win. And so this year, Duke was a number 1 seed, and Houston was a number 1 seed, and you could, and the champion Florida was a number 1 seed, and so you can pick the seeds and do pretty well, and then you can also pick your favorite team for an upset. And almost every year there are upsets.
Or by uniform color choice.
Exactly. Ding, ding, ding. People literally choose by uniform color. But a lot of times people have a personal connection. It might be where you went to school, or your best friend went to school, or you might just live in the area. So here we are in Greater Boston, so we might pick Boston College if they were in the tournament. They weren't. They stunk this year. But
ouch.
Anyway, so it becomes kind of a soap opera because you just want to see how it turns out. And of course, if you put $5 in the pool, then you have that much more interest in how it comes out. And so it's wildly popular. This year, unfortunately, there weren't as many upsets, which makes it less interesting, although it made for some great games. So if you were just a straight basketball fan, it wasn't bad toward the end. But until on the women's side, UConn just destroyed South Carolina. But a lot of the games were very close and very exciting. But there weren't many upsets. This was only the second time ever that all of the number 1 seeds won their regions. On the men's side, and on the women's side, 3 out of 4 number 1 seeds won. So, all right, enough about bracketology. Now we get to today's book, and today's book, in working on the same theme, is called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. Annie is a fascinating woman who I first became aware of many years ago watching a poker tournament on TV. I think it was the World Series of Poker. And she wasn't merely a professional poker player, but she was a champion. She was one of the very best in the world. It turns out she had been a PhD student in psychology, and she had completed the coursework, but before she did her dissertation, her life trajectory took a turn, and she found herself playing poker and doing really well, and the rest is history. Mm-hmm. But now this was several years ago that she wrote her book, and it's called Thinking in Bets. And I think it is useful for anyone for decision making because it really helps you clarify your thinking. She wants us to get good at differentiating between good bets and good results. Everyone makes the mistake of something good happens, we say, oh, that was the best decision I ever made. Mm-hmm. Or something bad happens and, I can't believe, what a fool I was. And that actually isn't always the case. Often you made a great decision for great reasons and you had bad luck or you had good luck. The universe does what it does. All we can do is take the information we have and try and figure out what we ought to do. And so, this book is very good at laying out all of the ways we think for better or worse. Mostly she's pointing out the flaws in our logic, but helping us to do it better. So get Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke if you want to think better.
Making the best of serendipity.
Making the best of serendipity, putting yourself in a position to get lucky. All right, so today's bit is about being your best, and I'm actually going to expand that theme of thinking in bets. As I say, Annie talks about good decisions versus good results. And by the way, I'm going to differentiate between my idea of betting, in which you're acting based on your expectation of outcomes, and pure gambling, where you're just hoping for the best without rationale. And those are two different things. Semantically, I'm drawing that distinction. Those aren't, the dictionary won't draw that distinction for you, but that's how I think about it. I don't like to gamble. I have zero interest in playing the slots. But I do like to bet when I think I have good information and when I think my chances are better than average. If it feels like a good investment, I want to do that.
Even you don't care that there's certainty. It doesn't have to have certainty.
That is a huge point. I do not care that I have certainty. I care that over time, if I make decisions like that, I should succeed. And of course I might not, because as you know, there is no certainty. And that holds us back. Fear of failure really
Absolutely.
cripples people. Yeah, I think it was adaptive once upon a time when we lived in, small bands, and if you screwed up socially, it could really cost you in the band, or if you were out gathering berries or hunting and you screwed up, something might devour you. And so these days it's pretty easy to survive, but we still have this instinctual fear of failure.
And equilibrium is comfort.
Yeah. Failure can be our friend. Let me rephrase. It's not that failure is our friend. It's that embracing the possibility of failure can be liberating. It can enable us to succeed. If you want to open your own business, you better be ready to fail because most small businesses fail. But of course, that's how people get fabulously wealthy, is they take those gambles or bets, as I'd call them. They bet that they have a good product. They bet that this can succeed, and that if it does, they're going to live happily ever after. So, yeah, we misinterpret the data that we have sometimes. So Annie talks about differentiating between the good decisions and good results. And one of the reasons that I knew I liked this woman is for years after Super Bowl 49 in 2015, there was a play in which the Seattle Seahawks threw the ball. They were driving, about to win the game. They could have handed off to their star running back, Marshawn Lynch, beast mode they called him, to just punch it in and win the game. And instead they threw a pass, and that pass got intercepted. And everyone went bananas and said that was the worst decision in Super Bowl history and in football history, and no one could believe what a moron the coach Pete Carroll was for calling such a play. And Annie points out that he was right to do so. And I had been saying for years that he was right to do so. So imagine how pleased I was when I read it in her book. And from a psychology PhD / professional champion professional poker player, I felt a little bit vindicated.
Rightly so.
So, and here's the reason. So basically it was a 1 yard in pattern, if I've got the terminology right, to Ricardo Lockett. And most of the time, number one, that pass often is completed. If that pass had been completed, game over, Seahawks win. And then everyone's calling Pete Carroll a genius for thinking of that and not just running Marshawn Lynch into the line. If it doesn't get completed, it gets knocked down. And guess what? The clock stops and they get to run Marshawn Lynch. They get to do it all over again. Barely any time comes off the clock. Whereas if they run Marshawn Lynch right off at the start and he doesn't make it, then the clock runs out and they lose because they were out of timeouts. So basically, Pete Carroll bought the Seahawks a free play by calling that play, which almost never gets intercepted. So it was pretty darn safe. And if you were to do this in a computer simulation, just estimating very roughly, Pete Carroll's way would have succeeded about 75% of the time, and the run up the middle would have succeeded slightly less than half of the time. So that's kind of a no-brainer if you do the math. And by the way, I did the math. I went back and looked up the stats. And that year, in those short yardage situations, Marshawn Lynch was successful just under half of the time, and he wasn't always playing the Patriots, who were really good and had 2 weeks to prepare for him, and they were ready for Marshawn Lynch. So I don't know what his chances were, 33%, maybe 40. Anyway, it was a great call by Pete Carroll. It just had a really, really painfully bad result. And so everyone, by the way, people will not listen to this. They will not, hear any argument that it was a terrible decision.
What's the education here to be a little bit more broad about applying your hindsight?
Yeah, it is. It's what Annie Duke is talking about. To understand why you made the decision, understand what that decision means. Like, and as I said, if you did the math, that means you pretty much have a 75% chance of success. And so if it's that much better, if it's half again more likely to succeed, that's a good decision. Regardless of whether, that 75%, that's not a guarantee. 1 time out of 4, it fails.
Right.
So this time it failed spectacularly. And by the way, that's like maybe 1 time out of 30 that it might get intercepted, if that. So it was just really unlucky. There was a big collision, and it was a miracle that Malcolm Butler held on to that ball. Even though he was ready for the play, most of the time, any defensive back in that situation, that same collision, isn't even going to hold on to it. So, but I don't want to just beat up on those Monday morning quarterbacks. We all do this. My friend Chip at Bridge last night, we were playing a hand. Chip was the other pair playing against us. And we were playing this one hand in which he played low, imagining that I was unlikely to have the queen of clubs. And he explained his reasoning. It was sound reasoning. Chip is a smart guy. He's a professional computer programmer, and his reasoning was great. I probably didn't have the queen of clubs, so he played low. And of course, you know what happens next. I had the queen of clubs, so I won that trick, and they went down. They didn't make their bid. And Chip immediately started beating himself up. He was thinking of the couldas and the wouldas and the shouldas, and was trying to explain to himself why he shouldn't have done what he did, only he was right the first time. Mm-hmm. He was just hung up the way most of us are on the bad result. That's
very comforting.
Yeah.
Actually, if you think about it.
Yeah. We don't have to beat ourselves up if we know why we made our decisions. Sometimes we get unlucky. Sadly, the universe isn't always looking out for us. I'm mostly Irish, and people love to talk about the luck of the Irish. Well, that didn't work out so well during the potato famine, did it? So I don't like to trust to luck. I like to make good decisions, and then luck will do what it does. But if I make good decisions, I can sort of make my own luck. I can tilt the odds, and so that's what we all should do. So that failure we have to recognize. I think it's very useful to sort of picture, visualize failure. What would that look like? There was a tragic story a couple of years ago, maybe a few years ago now, about these 2 teenage boys, and they were driving along and probably driving too fast, and then they came to a drawbridge which suddenly started to go up, and this kid had seen movies, and he thought he would punch it and just jump the bridge. Well, looks cool in the movies, but physics does not agree with that decision, and sadly, they went in and died. They didn't. Of course, they didn't make it. And the obvious problem there was that kid, of course, he was young. Who knows whether he was on anything or not? But he probably didn't really think too much about his own mortality, and he just thought he was going to make it, and he didn't think about, well, what are the consequences of failure? Pretty dire. Even if he had a 99% chance of success, a 1% chance of dying when you're 19 is not a good bet.
No, not a good form of whimsy.
So, but that's an extreme example in which, failure really does matter. But there are so many situations where we're very afraid. A common one is if you ask someone out on a date. It feels bad if they say no, even if they're very polite about it. And even if they say something flattering as they're saying no, it feels bad and it feels, traumatic for some people. But really, mostly the person you asked is flattered, and most of the time there are no negative consequences, and you're just fine.
And and you can move on.
And and you can move on. And by the way, if they say yes, then maybe you live happily ever after. So that's a pretty good bet. You take your chances. There are things that are in between. If I mentioned starting your own business. That can be scary, and that can cost a lot of money if you're wrong. But you can say, oh, wait a minute, I have a little money in the bank, so if this business flops, I'm not going to starve. And oh, by the way, I'm still employable, and I have the kind of resume that gets hired, and so I can afford to take a chance on living my dream and starting up the business that I always wanted to start up. And maybe getting rich that way, so I can gamble, even though it's not trivial. That failure is not a trivial one, and of course it feels bad. But this happens again and again with small businesses, entrepreneurs. They fail over and over again. But most of the successful entrepreneurs have tried more than once, and that embracing the failure can really be helpful. Sometimes that helps to know what you're getting into. Sometimes a little research does help us make good decisions. One of the reasons Deb and I know each other, we worked at Microsoft, and the reason I worked at Microsoft was because my little startup company got acquired back in 1998. And we had this product called the Notes to Exchange Application Converter. And there was this thing called Lotus Notes that could enable you to, if you were working for some large corporation and you needed some in-house function, maybe the employee newsletter or payroll or a calendar or whatever it might be you had a custom solution for your business. You could design that pretty easily in this thing called Lotus Notes. Well, the problem with Lotus Notes was it wasn't a robust email backbone for these large organizations that had huge volumes of email. Lotus Notes just wasn't up to that. So there were large corporations and large organizations that wanted to get off Notes and onto Exchange, but they had all these applications, and they didn't want to lose all that work they'd done. So that's where we came in. So we took their Notes applications and converted them to these Exchange forms that had some functionality. The problem was they didn't have that much, and they weren't as good, and it stunk. The results were not good, and we felt like we had failed. But along the way, we were analyzing what they were doing with their Lotus Notes investment and how often these things got used and what we could do for them and what we couldn't do for them, and where we couldn't perform some function for them, we stubbed out some code and said, you need to write some code here. And customers loved it because it removed that fear of the unknown. People said, what are we going to do with all our apps? Well, we told them. We said, okay, these 17 you haven't used in the last 2 years, so you can just get rid of those. These next 5 barely get used. You can get rid of those. These 32 you use a lot. We can nail 16 of them, but the other 16, you got work to do. And here's how much work you have to do. And maybe it was going to cost them $800,000 of development time, which sounds scary to us, but for these large corporations, well, they were going to make $2 million back in the first year because of the email improvements. So now a business decision maker could say, oh, we can do that. We got this. You remove the fear of the unknown, and now you're free to move forward.
It's magical.
So learn what you can. And of course, sometimes you just don't have that kind of information. But if you can get it, great. If you don't have the information, know what you can get easily and what you can't.
And if you don't get stuck, you can at least look for the information, and you'll get something from that in itself.
Exactly. And sometimes you just never get the information you need, but you still might have pretty good reason to believe you can succeed, and you might decide to go ahead and make the bet anyway. But yeah, get the information you can, envision failure, see if you can afford it, and then be ready to move forward. Now, in all of this, self-awareness and self-honesty are huge. Don't try and talk yourself into something that you don't really believe in. Sometimes doing a gut check really works. Sometimes if you're honest with yourself, you say, I don't know. And the reason you don't know isn't just that you don't have enough information. It's that you think it's really not that likely for these reasons. And you just don't feel good about the bet, and it doesn't seem worth it. But yeah, so figure it out, and you'll have a better life. So, all right, that wraps it up for today. Thanks to MMTV Studios here on Main Street in Melrose, and thanks to our friends next door at Hannah's Brewing Company. Thanks to the silent bee in the background, Deb Bowling, and of course, thanks to you for tuning in. I'm Jim McCoy, and I hope you'll join us again soon. Bye.